Philology at this university. It's the second International Education. It is a conference which is very warmly hosted by the Faculty of Education and Philology at our university. The Faculty of Education in the University of St. Clement and the representatives of all the other institutions of the academic world. As we are all aware, this conference, that if they are well combined one with the other, the learner be critical, be a critic. In this respect, I would like to give the floor to Professor Ali Ashari, Dean of the Faculty of Education and Philology.
Sipas marrëveshjes ka bërë komisioni, të nderuar pjesëmarrës, të shpresojmë që vitin tjetër konferenca e tretë të zhvillohet në Lipër. Këto veprimtari të organizuara nga 3 fakultetet edukimit në Fillori, në Korçë dhe në Lipër, kanë rëndësi jo vetëm shkencore dhe pedagogjike, por në kontekstin e sotëm, ato marrin një domethënie të madhe, si kuvende intelektualesh që përcjellin mirëfilli mesazhe të bashkëpunimit ndërkufitar dhe janë shprehje konkrete të fëmijësisë së mirë historike midis 3 vendeve, dhe kjo ndodh sepse intelektualët, sidomos mësuesit dhe pedagogët, dinë të mbërrihen mbi interesat politike të çastit dhe të vështrojnë më përpara dhe më lart drejt ardhmërisë së brezave që vijnë. Kjo konferencë ka si temë bosh të menduarit kritik në edukim, që si term dhe si koncept nuk është i ri, por e ka burimin në antikitetin e dashur grek. Të menduarit kritik përgjatë zhvillimit të shoqërisë njerëzore ka qenë dhe vetë filozofia bazë e shumë shkollave, rrymave retorive në gjithë aspektet e veprimtarisë shoqërore. Por qysh nga gjysmë e dytë e shekullit 20 dhe deri sot, zhvillimi i menduarit kritik është bërë universal si filozofi dhe praktikë mbarë botërore, sepse ai përfaqet gjitha tej dhe është aftësi e njerëzve që vlerësojnë pikpamjet e tyre dhe të tjerëve, kanë mundësi të japin alternativa, që hedhin hipoteza dhe nxjerrin përfundime të arsyeshme. Edukimin e menduarit kritik nuk e bën vetëm shkolla, sado e fuqishme tjetër ajo. Të menduarit kritik si filozofi dhe praktikë duhet jetë pjesë e mëdhësisë dhe veprimit të gjithëve, e politikanëve, e drejtuesve të gjitha niveleve, e shkencëtarëve, e filozofëve, e juristëve, e biznesmenëve, pra të gjitha ata që quhen aktorë, në thonjza në jetën e shoqërisë, sepse si shprehen autorët e librit Fuqia e menduarit kritik, të menduarit kritik shtrihet në shumë territore. Ai përdoret në gjitha disiplinat, në gjitha fushat e jetës publike, në gjitha shkencat, në gjitha sektorët, në gjithë sektorët e biznesit dhe në gjithë profesionet. Vetëm shumë shoqëria jonë do të ecë përpara dhe do të përballojë sfidat e satës. Ne besojmë se 354 referatet e punktesat e kësaj konference, përgatitur prej 172 pedagogëve dhe studiuesve nga Universiteti Korçës, Fillorinës, Vitëgas, por dhe të tjera, edhe nga universitetet tjera shqiptare dhe nga Kosova, do t'i shërbejnë realizimin të këtij qëllimi të madh që ka edukimi në mbar botën. Pikërisht për këtë mision duhet falenderoj edhe një herë gjithë humtuesit pa i përmendur emra sepse ata i kemi në program. Në mënyrë veçantë falenderoj profesorën Andriu Buspic dhe profesorën Vladimir Musajin që pranuan ftesën tonë për të mbajtur referatet kryesore në konferencë si një mes i shkuar për zhvillimin e ideve për të menduarit kritik në edukim. Duke uruar kundëmarrë dhe qendrim të keq në qytetin e Korçës, me lejonit i deklaroj punimet të hapura për konferencën e dytë ndërkombëtare Education në Korçë. Faleminderit. Të nderuar miq, pedagog, student, pjesëmarrës në këtë konferencë ndërkombëtare. Kam dhënë dhe kënaqësinë që ju përshëndes dhe t'ju uroj miqve dhe ftuarve mirëseardhje në Universitetin e Korçës në këtë konferencë ndërkombëtare që Fakulteti i Edukimit dhe Filologjisë në Universitetin tonë, së bashku me Universitetin e Fillorinës dhe Universitetin e Vitëras organizojnë sot. Konferenca që ne organizojmë sot është një aktivitet i ideuar dhe planifikuar nga të 3 universitetet tona në kuadër të bashkëpunimit që ne kemi pasur prej vitesh me njëri tjetrin, ku nuk kanë munguar vizitat reciproke dhe kontributet reale që kemi dhënë së bashku në të gjitha fushat e programeve studimore të ngjashme që ne kemi sot, ku padyshim edukimi mbetet një nga aspektet më të rëndësishme dhe imperativ në ndryshimet dhe evoluimet e vazhdueshme që ne po bëjmë së bashku për të arritur dhe përmirësuar standardet europiane që kërkon sot hapësira europiane arsim të lartë, ku padyshim është të përfshirë edhe Universiteti ynë. Mendimi kritik është një element i cili përmendet shpesh në diskutimet e artusve të kurrikulave si një detaj i cili duhet domosdoshmërisht të gjejë hapësirën e vet si në orën e mësimit, ashtu dhe në veprimtaritë e të cilat nxënësi apo studenti duhet i realizojnë jashtë. Nëse ne nxisim studentët të mendojnë në mënyrë analitike, të pyesin dhe të shprehin kuriozitetet për njohuritë që marrin dhe të mësojnë të lexojnë midis rreshtave, atëherë ja kemi dalë të themi se kemi arritur një prej fiksionimeve të arsimit, aftësinë e studentit për të mbartur njohuri dhe për të aplikuar në kontekstin e duhur shoqëror. Sot po flitet shpesh për mësimdhënien me një qendër nxënësin dhe lehtësitë që të menduari kritik i ofron kësaj fundit. Megjithatë, unë jam i mendimit se duhet të flitet po aq shpesh për reforma dhe nisma konkrete që duhet të ndërmerren në edukimin e individëve në mënyrë që në të ardhmen këta të dinë të përdorin të menduari kritik jo vetëm në kuadër të nxënësit, por dhe si një element që i nxit ata të diskutojnë çështje të domosdoshme dhe problematika të caktuar të shoqërisë dhe të jenë të aftë të kontrollin të stil. Si tillë mendimi kritik nuk është vetëm një çështje e metodologjisë së mësimdhënies. Ai përket çdo kushte që kërkon mendim të pavarur, studim analitik dhe iniciativë për të sjellë ndryshim. Në këtë kuadër, unë mendoj se veprimtaritë si kjo e sotme do të sjellin në një përvezë të përbashkët diskutimin, mendimin e ekspertëve të fushave dhe përvojën institucione ndërkombëtare dhe përfundimet që viten dhe përtejnë nga praktika dhe puna këtimore e pjesëmarrësve në këtë konferencë. Shpreh bindjen se në përfundim të saj, aktorët e përfshirë do të mund të ndërmarrin nisma konkrete në përfshirjen e këtij elementi në veprimtaritë mësimore dhe kurrikulat e gjithë halkave të arsimit. Duke falenderuar dhe njëherë të gjithë pjesëmarrësit në këtë veprimtari dhe veçanërisht Universitetin e Favorinës dhe atë të Bitolës për gatishmërinë që treguan për organizimin dhe marrëdhënien e saj, dua të siguroj se Universiteti do të jetë në vazhdimsi një mbështetës dhe përkrahasi çdo nisme të përbashkët në të mirë të bashkëpunimit tonë ndërkombëtar për të çuar arsimin e brezave tanë në nivele që kërkon sot koha, për të kaluar me sukses sfidat që na presin të ardhmen tonë të përbashkët. Suksese dhe punë të mbarë kësaj konference dhe njëherë faleminderit të gjithë studiuesve pedagogëve që me kujdesat e tyre do japin një kontribut real në këtë konferencë. Urime dhe sukses.
Great pleasure that I welcome the brief participants of this conference.
Τον Βίτολα, κύριε.
Të nderuar kolegë, të nderuar pjesëmarrës, të dashur student që keni ardhur nga Korça, nga Bitola dhe nga Favorina.
Κύριε Γενική Πρόξενε της Ελλάδος.
Dhe ju zoti konsul i Greqisë.
Είμαστε πολύ χαρούμενοι γιατί ένας θεσμός που ξεκίνησε πριν από 2 χρόνια στη Φλόρινα φαίνεται να συνεχίζεται, να ενισχύεται με το δεύτερο συνεδριό μας στην Κοριτσά και ελπίζουμε, ευχόμαστε σε άλλα 2 χρόνια να πάμε στο 3ο συνέδριο στα Βίτολα.
Jam shumë i gëzuar që përpara 2 vjetësh ai institucion që arritëm ngritëm, ajo hallë që arritëm ngritëm për të na lidhur ne në Follorin, pati sukses dhe patëm një konferencë në Follorin vjet, kemi këtë konferencë këtu dhe shpresoj se po një konferencë po kaq të mirë do të bëjmë edhe me një tjetër që vjen në Bitola.
Αγαπητές και αγαπητοί συνάδελφοι, στη Φλόρινα θεωρούμε ότι αυτή η συνεργασία δεν πρέπει απλώς να συνεχιστεί, αλλά θα πρέπει να διευρυνθεί.
Të dashur kolegë, unë mendoj se pikërisht kjo punë që nisi në Follorin dhe ky bashkëpunim që nisi, jo thjesht duhet të vazhdojë, por duhet të organizohet në mënyrën më të mirë.
Προτείνω λοιπόν να επιχειρήσουμε κοινά εκπαιδευτικά, αναπτυξιακά ή και ερευνητικά προγράμματα.
Pra, propozoj që të kemi të rishikojmë të gjitha këto sistemet dhe programet e edukimit në përgjithësi në mënyrë që t'i përmirësojmë sa më mirë nëpërmjet mendimeve që sjellim.
Στα πλαίσια της Ευρωπαϊκής Ένωσης.
Në kuadër të Bashkimit Evropian.
Μάθαμε ότι το Erasmus Plus program
Mësuam se programi Erasmus
θα ανοίξει τον Μάρτιο και προτιθέμετα να υποβάλουμε σχετική πρόταση συνεργασίας τόσο με την Παιδαγωγική Σχολή και το Πανεπιστήμιο στην Κοριτσά, όσο και με το αντίστοιχο στα Μπίκαινα.
do të fillojë në mars. Kështu duhet të jemi të gatshëm që të japim propozimet tona në mënyrë që të na merren parasysh. Kjo për sa i përket dhe universitetit tonë në Pollorin, dhe në Bitola dhe në Korçë, të gjitha shkollat tona pedagogjike dhe institucionet tona.
Ίσως ακόμα μπορούμε να επιδιώξουμε, αν και είναι λίγο δυσκολότερο, να κάνουμε ένα κοινό μεταπτυχιακό πρόγραμμα μεταξύ των τριών σχολών και αυτό είναι ένα πρόγραμμα το οποίο μπορεί να χρηματοδοτηθεί και να ενισχυθεί από την Ευρωπαϊκή Ένωση.
Ndoshta do të jetë mirë, pavarësisht se kjo është e vështirë në panë të parë, të arrijmë të ndërtojmë së bashku një program pas universitar, pas diplomimit për studentët, me pjesëmarrjen e të tre universiteteve tona. Dhe pikërisht kjo gjë do të përforcohet dhe edhe do të ndihmohet ekonomikisht nga Bashkimi Evropian.
Σε μια εποχή που ο ρατσισμός και η ξενοφοβία φαίνεται να ξανάρχονται,
Në një epokë ku racizmi dhe xenofobia duket sikur po janë evidente, po vërtetohen,
θεωρούμε ότι εμείς, τα μέλη της ακαδημαϊκής κοινότητας,
e konsiderojmë të nevojshme që ne pjesëtarët e bashkësisë akademike
πρέπει να πρωτοστατήσουμε
duhet të jemi në ballë të luftës kundër saj.
στην αμοιβαία κατανόηση,
Pra, duhet të jemi në ballë të mirëkuptimit reciprok,
την αναγνώριση της διαφορετικότητας
të njohjes dhe të pranimit të ndryshmërisë së tjetrit
και τη συνεννόηση μεταξύ των λαών.
dhe të marrëveshjeve dhe të bashkëpunimit midis popujve.
Ολοκληρώνοντας αυτές τις σύντομες σκέψεις, έχουμε
Këto mendime të shpejta, ju uroj
καλή επιτυχία στο συνέδριό μας.
një sukses të madh i kësaj mbledhjes tonë.
Ευχαριστώ πολύ.
Kristera Dobrovićer. It's a pleasure to be here in Korçë at the opening of the second international conference Education Across Borders, Critical Thinking in Education. This conference provides a very unique opportunity for all of us to discuss about the different educational policies, researchers, and other perspectives in the most friendly academic atmosphere. Also, this conference strengthens the cooperation between our three faculties, the Faculty of Education in Philology in Korçë, the Faculty of Education in Florina, and the Faculty of Education in Bitola. I hope that it will open new horizons for collaboration between our countries. But most important of all, I think will be the work that you do here tomorrow on how teacher education should move forward. Everything we do must be geared towards making every child's educational experience a better one. You have many interesting sessions ahead. I wish all of you a fruitful conference. Thank you.
Gentlemen, Drama, Dobroveče, Kalspera. I would like to welcome, I would like to congratulate, not welcome, congratulate all the participants here in Korçë, this important conference. I had the pleasure and the honor to be present 2 years ago in Florina when this effort started, and it was really successful, and one of the reasons that it has continued today. I think that this area, I mean Korçë, Florina, and Bitola, is geographically and socially very close. So this proximity has to be maintained, has to be cultivated, and with your contribution, the cooperation will be fruitful in the future, more fruitful than today. I heard Professor Karyotoglou saying that there are ideas, concrete ideas, for deepening this cooperation. I fully agree with him that we need to see how we can forge projects, common projects of cooperation, so as to deepen the regional cooperation that is not only for educational reasons, but of course this is very important. But most important is the, let's say, the deepening of understanding. Through this and other means, we have to deepen our understanding, three different people with a lot in common. So I urge you to have this in mind when you have this conference, cooperate, and have in mind that this cooperation will be broader in the future. Thank you very much, and wishing all success to your conference.
Good evening. Honorable Director, Professor Dr. Giorgimero, Honorable Council of Greece, dear participants from Faculties of Education from Victoria, Florina, and Korçë, ladies and gentlemen, it's a pleasure for me to be here among you, not only for this conference, but I have many reasons for being in Korçë, not only as an educator, but I have many ties here, which is difficult to explain. But for the reason of this conference, I would like to say that critical thinking started in Korçë, as well as in other universities of Albania in 1997. And I see here in Korçë a major progress on implementing critical thinking, which is not only a subject, but it has become a way of thinking of students here at this university and at local education authorities in the schools of Korçë. So I would like to congratulate the professors of the University of Korçë and a special thanks to Professor Ali Ashari, who is a promoter of critical thinking at this university. In my presentation, I would like to focus on some issues on critical thinking, which is very difficult to explain because critical thinking is very complex. But I would like to leave open some of these issues because I do not have all the responses for critical thinking. What is critical thinking? It is a very complex and it's very difficult to give a single statement. It is a rational examination of ideas, assumptions, principles, arguments, conclusions, issues, statements, beliefs, and all of these guide us for actions. Is this enough to explain critical thinking? It's not. It's more. There are many definitions on critical thinking. People explain critical thinking based on their interests, based on their profession, based on the other issues, which is related to their work on daily basis, which is related with some other issues, which is related with problem solving, with creative thinking, with reflective thinking, and other issues. So different authors, different educators, they give different perspectives and statements about critical thinking. But most important about critical thinking is that it describes the process we use to uncover and check our assumptions. So critical thinking, it is based on some assumptions, and during the implementation of these assumptions, during the practice, we check how right or wrong we are with our assumptions by using the analysis, the reflective thinking, creativity, and how we solve the problems by using the critical thinking. One of the definitions of critical thinking is used by Richard Paul and Adler, and they look at critical thinking as a self-directed and disciplined, self-monitored, and other issues which are related to the person. It is a very personal mean of thinking and actions based on the assumptions, and it has the effective communication and problem solving. When we are talking today about communication as a skill for the knowledge society, We need to communicate our ideas. We need to communicate our solutions. We need to communicate our beliefs and our approaches in order to verify how right or wrong we are in our daily practice. And this is why critical thinking is very rich approach and very complex one. When we are talking about the qualities of the critical thinkers, they raise vital questions and problems. They formulate those clearly and precisely. They gather information about assessment. They're using their abstract ideas and they reach conclusions which are well reasoned and test them in many different situations against relevant criteria and standards. So it is a disciplined process and it is based on some standards. The critical thinkers are open-minded persons. They offer alternative ideas. They reorganize, recognize, and assess all these ideas and assumptions, and they see implications and practical consequences in the practice. And they communicate with the others their results, their ideas, and the solutions to very complex problems. There is a difference between critical thinking and thinking. When we are talking about critical thinking, it is a very controlled and purposeful, more likely process to lead to obvious beneficial results. But when we are talking about thinking, it is a mental activity. So it is uncontrolled. Critical thinking is a controlled and self-disciplined process, and thinking is uncontrolled. It may serve a purpose, but we often aren't aware of its benefits. We might not even remember our thoughts at all. Which are some of the characteristics of critical thinking we need to equip students, or in general, the young generations, to use in their real life and to give them contributions for the development of the society and to contribute to the economic growth? The main characteristics of critical thinking are that it is rational and reflective. It involves healthy, constructive, and skepticism. We everything see in a very sophisticated skepticism. Even when we are facing with some absolute truth, we always use our skepticism because we need to use our critical thinking and then to see how it works and to prove our assumptions, to verify in the practice. It is autonomous because it depends on the individuals, and it includes creative thinking. Creative thinking is part of the critical thinking and they're related together. When we are talking today about some characteristics of the knowledge society, it involves the characteristics of problem solving, digital culture, creative thinking, working with others, etc., which has the umbrella of critical thinking. It is a fair thinking and it focuses on what to believe and to do. So we need to be based on our beliefs, to accept these beliefs, and then to have some actions in our practice. We are talking every day about critical thinking, but why it is important? It is important because we need to clarify ourselves that we have changed the mode of teaching and learning in our classrooms and in universities. The old model, fashion, or the traditional one, based on the model of teacher-centered approach, the information is the end point of the process, or better to say, is the output of the process. We verify how better students have learned based on the memorization, how strictly they reproduce the information. But when we use the critical thinking, the information is not the end point, is not the output. The information is the starting point, is the input of the process. and then we elaborate the information, then the critical thinking, the knowledge we create, the knowledge we build is the result of the process. This is the difference between two approaches, the traditional one and the modern approach, which is child-centered or student-centered approach. So, critical thinking is key to resolving problems. Teachers must take complex decisions in the classroom when they're teaching. They are faced with new situations and they need to continuously update their knowledge and skills. We are living in a knowledge society, in a period where the information is exploding. So we never know the information which is today. Because of the information, or the producer of the information, we need to update ourselves and we operate with the information which can be out of date very soon, and we need to be exposed to the updated information, and we need not only to update the information, but to update our knowledges by building these knowledges, creating these knowledges, and by the way, we need to update our skills. Critical thinking is key issue for students and even for teachers to pass the state exam. So the exams should be based not only in the memorization, because this is the old approach of teaching and learning, but based on using their critical thinking by new situations, by open-ended questions, etc. So, which is the distinction between critical thinking and creativity? Creativity is an original thinking, and it is a major component for critical thinking. It is thinking that results in the development of new ideas and products. Creativity in decision making is the ability to develop and implement new and better solutions. Which are some of the characteristics of critical thinking compared with the characteristics of critical thinkers? They are able to generate ideas rapidly. So this is why in our schools, in universities, and everywhere, we are encouraging people to be creative, to generate ideas, innovative ideas and solutions for making the progress forward. These people are flexible and spontaneous, are able to provide original solutions to problems. They prefer complex thought processes. They are independent and self-confident, and they're exhibiting distinct individualism. Now let's go to the teaching process. We are talking about critical thinking. What is critical thinking? What is creative thinking? Which are the characteristics of critical thinkers and the creative thinkers? We need to use critical thinking in the teaching and learning process in the classroom. We cannot divide teaching from learning and learning from teaching. The first thing for teachers is they need to know better, which is their content, to know what constitutes critical thinking. They need to rethink the content as a mode of thinking, not based on repetition and memorization, and to design teaching as experiences based in questioning, problem solving, and critical thinking. This is why we insist that teaching today should be or must be related with the problems of the real life. We need not to give solutions to the students. We need to offer them problems and then to see which are the solutions from these students. The solutions will come by applying critical thinking and by using creative thinking. They learn better the content and they build critical thinking skills. This is why we use the approach of constructivism in the classroom. Constructivism and social constructivism. Because we encourage students to build their knowledge and by using the creativity to create new knowledge. Which are some of the strategies for developing critical thinking and promoting it? We have developed many strategies during these years, which are more than 30 or 40, but these are not enough. Teachers, they need to ask students to summarize in writing and orally what they do in the classroom and what students they have to say about this. They have to comment, they have to add new information, they have to make analysis and to reflect from the information, from the knowledge they built. Teachers, they need to ask students to elaborate on what has been said, either by giving examples and using their own words. Teachers ask students to make connections between related concepts. Connections are very much important because when we are encouraging students to build new knowledge, the new knowledge should be built based on the previous knowledge. Some of the previous knowledge we use, some we will not use because the information is out of date, it doesn't make sense to our real life, so we need to make some connections with the new information, the new knowledge with the previous one. So, and then they have to reflect which are the benefits of the new knowledge they have built from, let's say, from a classroom hour, from a subject, or from a topic, etc. Discussion is a means for promoting critical thinking in the classroom, and in addition to discussion, questions are a very good strategy for promoting critical thinking, because students, they need to communicate their ideas. This is why nowadays communication is a very powerful tool for all people to communicate their ideas, to communicate their knowledge, their solutions, etc. And by communication, that they discuss with their colleagues, they discuss with the audience, or with other ways, and the teachers will ask continuously students to record their personal reflections in writing. Everybody has something to reflect upon the new knowledge they have built, and teachers, they should encourage students to reflect upon this. And then they have to be critical listeners to the others, because they need from the others to be listened, but they have to listen to the others, and in that way they improve the communication skills by promoting discussions and opening and raising these questions. Which are some of the questions to promote critical thinking? There are two levels of questions. There are some lower level questions which are based on memorization, and high order level thinking questions which are open-ended and aim to provoke divergent thinking. So they go beyond the level of recall, they go beyond it, and then they should promote the evaluation and the synthesis of facts and concepts. This is why writing is a very powerful for critical thinking. Students will learn to write, but to write in a very constructive way and to make synthesis of what they write. To write abstracts, to write reflections, to write in short paragraphs, etc. So that means they use critical thinking in the, every step when they write. Which are some of the questions we use in the critical thinking with students? Usually teachers, they should raise some questions like this. What are the implications of, let's say, the pollution in the atmosphere? Which are the implications of using, etc., etc.? Why is it important to save water, for example? These are some questions, and they generate lots of solutions and ideas. What is another way to look at? So we need to look at the things, at the processes in various perspectives, not only in one perspective, because we need to promote divergent thinking and questions that ask students to reflect on their own thinking processes, to identify what particular form of critical thinking they are using. And it is the role of the teacher and the education in general to promote metacognition, which is very powerful for students to know themselves and to evaluate everything in the process when they use the critical thinking. The most important thing for everybody, and especially for teachers, is that teachers must decide what is most important in the course. Sometimes the teachers, they need to explain everything in details that is written in the textbooks. It is not very much important to explain everything in details, but to be selective, to decide which is the most important information, which is the starting point for the critical thinking, and then to see the learning outcomes at the end of the lesson. But to be prepared for critical thinking, it takes time. It is time consuming, but we can see very benefits from using the critical thinking, and students will be or should be accountable for their learning. And by that way, we make them responsible in the school life and then responsible as citizens. Let's see the diagram, the benefits of the critical thinking, or let's see which are the outcomes based on the two authors, Rud and Irani. We see the stimulus from problem, from decision, from the others, and there are some individual factors and external factors that affect critical thinking. We see the dispositions of critical thinking, we have the knowledge, and we have critical thinking skills. By combining all these together, we reach different levels of critical thinking. Quality critical thinking outcome at a high level, then no critical thinking, and then very low quality. So, in order to promote critical thinking at higher order levels, we need to encourage everybody, especially students in schools, to build the knowledge on their own and to use metacognition. And by that way, we make them powerful learners because they see the power of knowledge. The power of knowledge which is constructed, which is created by them independently by using information. Knowledge in a discipline is necessary to think critically about the discipline. Although critical thinking skills are transferable, they are strengthened when applied within a context along with acquiring new knowledge. Critical thinking dispositions are developed over time and change slowly. Thank you.
Thank you, Professor Mosai, for the fact that I think that as educators we will all remember the main definition of critical thinking that you provided, the one in which it is a process that we use to uncover assumptions. In that respect, it is a direct contribution to the personal involvement of each of the learners in problem solving. And since we are trying to train learners that deal with the challenges of an ever-changing society, I think that this should be the main focus of education. Now, it is with great pleasure that I welcome Professor Andrew Goodspeed of the Southeastern European University of the State of Korçë, who is here to share with us, as a keynote speaker, his expert opinion on the impact that critical thinking has.
Dear Rector, dear Vice Rector, dear Deans, Professor Mosai, dear colleagues, dear friends, and indeed I hope dear students, because I hope there are students here, you are the reason why we are here. Good evening. My name is Andrew Goodspeed, and I am the Provost of Southeast European University, School in Fakulteti. Provost is an American term that means essentially vice president. And it is a pleasure indeed to be here. This is my first time in your university.
I just had a good opportunity to walk around. We have a good-looking campus. And I love that little garden you built out back. It's lovely. Part of my pleasure in joining you today, however, is because this is really a sister university to my own. And many of the people here are known to me. You have contributed to my university, either as students, or as guest lecturers, or as doctoral examiners, or participants in our conferences. And I must also begin by stating that I bring with me the personal greetings of my director, Professor Zamir Dika, whom many of you will know personally. I should also note at the outset how honored I am to be here at a conference on critical thinking that is organized by a consortium or a group of institutions. All of you on the organizing committee and on the management of these institutions are indeed to be commended for exercising outstanding leadership in higher education in this region. I think everyone in this room will agree that education, serious habits of thought and innovation will be crucial for the development of this area, whether it leads to prosperity and happiness or to misery and disappointment. Now, my paper addresses to a certain extent the value to both the self and society of critical thinking, and also how it impacts specifically on education. The topic, of course, of this conference is critical thinking in education. Now, I must state at the outset that my specialization is higher education, so many of my remarks will be specific to higher education. But I believe they will be appropriate also for those of you in primary and secondary education. And I think that we see the importance of this theme attested to by the variety of papers at this conference. In looking at the program, I see people approaching this theme from such varied standpoints as pedagogy, mathematics, literature, social sciences. This breadth of contribution tells us clearly that the theme chosen for this professional colloquium is indeed appropriate and is one of pressing importance to all of us as students, as researchers, and instructors. Now, the title of my address today is taken, as you probably recognize, from Immanuel Kant. There he is, larger than life. Who I believe actually stole the phrase from the Roman jurist Ulpian, and the phrase is, live honorably. I refer, of course, to his statement, it is not necessary whilst I live happily, but it is necessary that so long as I live honorably. Now, as I recall, perhaps someone can correct me if I'm mistaken, but I believe he was addressing the topic of suicide. He said suicide is not justified because life does not have to be happy, but it must be honorable. But why is this appropriate for a discussion of critical thinking in education? I believe that there is a relation, and this discussion, I hope, will help to indicate it. And so I hope that by the end of my talk, you will see some connection between Kant's notion of an honorable life and critical thinking and pedagogy. But I should, however, start with first principles, and that is to note how significantly the concept of critical thinking and of its role in education has changed over time. As Professor Muzai mentioned, there are many different definitions of what critical thinking might be. I hope, indeed, that we will hear many different ones at this conference. I will propose my own in just a minute. I don't say that it's better than yours, but I have the microphone. So I would first like merely to make 2 points. My first point is this. Much of what we recognize as the essential components of critical thinking, such as Professor Muzai was stating, restraining emotion and emphasizing logic, subjecting evidence to proof and to verifiability, checking authority, and allowing reason to guide our behavior and our conduct. We often think that these are products of the modern age, particularly of the modern scientific and industrial age. But the basic concept I have outlined would, in general forms, have been recognized as having value and intellectual validity by both Socrates and Confucius. And I think it's fascinating and indeed makes me happy to be alive that Socrates and Confucius, these two great men living so far apart, were almost essentially contemporaries. I wish they could have met. And these people would certainly have accepted the primacy of logic, of evidence, of reason, and of relevance, of course. But we tend to associate these ideas with the Enlightenment and with the development of the commonly agreed scientific method. But it is perhaps worth noting that even during the Enlightenment, there were people of great intellectual strength who were suspicious of the limits of the methods that we now consider standard practice for critical thought. I was 2 weeks ago yesterday in Vilnius, Lithuania. I was there at the request of their government doing a university accreditation inspection. And I spoke with a dissident Belarusian academic named Anatoly Mikhailov, who had been kicked out of his country by Alexander Lukashenko. And he and I were discussing the counter-enlightenment philosophers, specifically this man, Johann Georg Hamann. Hamann is an unfortunately underknown person, and counter-enlightenment is a very unfortunate term, because the major figures of that movement were logicians of the highest order. Hamann, for example, felt that logic and reason could not be absolute guides to all relevant experience and ideas, but that one would ultimately need to recognize one's own ignorance and perhaps accept the concept of a God. If this seems somewhat outdated, I will merely point out that he disagreed with, but was a personal friend of, Immanuel Kant, and Goethe considered him one of the finest intellects of his era. It is also one of the great regrets of all of us, I think, that when Immanuel Kant asked this guy to co-author with him a textbook of physics for children, Hamann declined. Had he not declined, we would have a physics textbook for children written by Immanuel Kant. I would love to have read that. My second point, however, is this. If critical thinking has changed somewhat, but retained its general features over time, we should recognize that its role in higher education has changed as well. If one looks at the history of higher education, one sees that the concept of universities has changed radically. In this, I should make clear, I leave out such things as Plato's Academy, which were not formal. Yet if we look at the institutions that inaugurated the model of Western universities, some of which still exist today in places like Bologna or Paris or Oxford, we see that they began essentially as schools of divinity. The serious and logical work undertaken in these institutions is something to which all of us owe a great debt of gratitude and respect, particularly those of us who have the pleasure of earning our living teaching in universities. But we should also note today that much of the work they did would be totally unacceptable in a basic logic class. It would not be permitted. They frequently accepted authority as being more important than proof. They accepted the testimony of miracles. They used texts that we now know, through linguistic or other evidence, to have been corrupted or altered by later authors. But my point is not to make fun of them. Entirely to the contrary, I wish to praise them. What they were doing in their own way and in their own culture was critical thought. With the evidence and resources available to them, they compared and contrasted and tried to come up with the most reasonable solutions. And any one of you who has had the pleasure of reading some of those medieval theological arguments will know what I'm talking about. Some of those arguments can seem bizarre, if not indeed insane, yet the sheer logical skill with which they are made is impressive. I speak, for example, about the enormous gallons of ink that were spilled trying to estimate the size of angels or how fast genies can fly. So if you will grant these 2 points, one, that the components of critical thinking have changed somewhat over time, but the main principles remain the same, and that universities and higher education have promoted critical thinking, even while some of them have changed, then I will propose my own definition of critical thinking. As Professor Musai warned us, none of them can be complete. Some of you will find mine too restrictive. But I think it would be, if I may express it concisely, this: rational skepticism. So what do I mean by this? I personally love the phrase critical thinking. There's nothing wrong with it, because it implies both a critical and a measured response to stimuli and phenomena. But it also emphasizes the necessary act of thinking. Criticism without thought is merely abuse or violence. Thought without criticism is obedience and slavery. What I like most about this comparable definition of rational skepticism is that it seems to me to strike a similar balance. Skepticism is, to my mind, extraordinarily good. It means merely that one does not believe everything that one sees or hears and intends to evaluate it. This is an intellectual approach that is resistant to religious revelation or to mystical experience, but I am not a prophet, nor am I a mystic, so I think this is the best I can do. And a skeptical attitude to experience and evidence seems to me to be valid. But I modify it by adding skeptical. Skepticism should be rational. One may doubt, but one must also be able to express reasons for one's doubt. And one should always be changeable in the face of more efficient or more elegant proof to the contrary. Let me give you an example of this. Let us imagine, as a Gedanken experiment, that someone in this conference claims to have discovered an unknown sonata by Ludwig van Beethoven in the library of Reykjavik, Iceland. I did check carefully, no one is giving that paper. How would we evaluate this? We would, I think, be very suspicious. Ludwig van Beethoven has been world famous for centuries. It is unlikely that people would overlook or simply miss something that he wrote. And what would it be doing in Reykjavik, Iceland? But we would subject it to testing. There are known samples of Beethoven's handwriting, such as that. We could compare the handwriting. We could do chemical analyses of the ink on the paper. We can do statistical and computer models of the trends in Beethoven's compositional methods, changes in tempo, changes in key, relations of instruments. And of course, we would ask experts to evaluate it, people who have devoted their professional lives and devoted much of their thought and effort to understanding the work of Beethoven. And if we were also to find out that perhaps a collector of Beethoven works had lived in Reykjavik 100 years ago, we might begin to think this was real. If it passed these tests, we might state that our skepticism had been justified, but that our reason had been persuaded. This would be rational skepticism or critical thinking in action. Now, of course, we don't do all of this for everything. We would take this extreme care over something 200 years old simply because a great many of us in this world believe that a new work by Beethoven would be a real discovery and something that would bring us pleasure. Plus, we're just curious by nature. If something is by one of humanity's supreme artists, we want to know it. Yet what you may ask, does this have to do with Immanuel Kant, living honorably and critical thinking in higher education? Well, higher education, as Professor Musai indicated, is changing more rapidly now than it perhaps has ever in the history of higher education. The huge increase of individuals obtaining higher degrees that began in the middle of the 20th century continues. It is perhaps worthwhile for those of us in this room, this beautiful auditorium, to remember that it was not so long ago that obtaining even a high school degree was a very distant dream for many, many people. The But the explosion of the internet, as Professor Huzai mentioned, we live in a knowledge society and an information society. The explosion of the internet is making information available to more people more rapidly and more easily than perhaps it has ever been in history. Consequently, universities are moving their information and their educational offerings online. It is possible right now to get a good and accredited degree from a respected institution without ever going there. This is something where the best universities in the world have stated that they want to compete with you and with me. It's very easy for us in the southern part of Europe to think we don't compete with Harvard, we don't compete with Yale, but it is their express intention of competing with us. And I'll give you just one example of this. This is from the Yale website. It is accessed today for those of you who are interested in bibliography. This is what the stated policy of Yale University is. There are numerous successful online education initiatives already underway at Yale. The two overarching goals for online educational initiatives are to experiment with new pedagogy that can improve teaching and learning for students at Yale, as well as new students who will be admitted to online educational programs, and continue to amplify the impact of great Yale teaching beyond the campus. Online education connects with one of the university's primary missions, the dissemination of knowledge. The online landscape provides unprecedented avenues for faculty to imagine new ways to transmit their teaching and share it with the world. This is one of the best universities on the planet. And they are saying they want to go online and offer their educational opportunities to anyone who can access them. And if you don't know it, you can go and see some of their lectures free right now, Yale Online. You can't get credit for them yet, but you can see a Yale class when you go home tonight. And so I often tell my students that the impact upon them is that they may very well, in their teaching life, teach more screens than people. The idea of a university, as many of us knew it, that is, a physical location with books and smart people in it, is becoming history. And there are good reasons for that. Why should any modern university invest 50 million euros in a new library when for a tiny fraction of that amount they could put all of their physical books and journals into digital form and make them available to every student and every staff member simultaneously, and at the same time keep the resources protected in climate-controlled environments? Now, as we know, one of the great values of education lies in what we might call engaged conversation and respectful disagreement that comes from classroom discussion. I think this will also, in time, become possible through technological meetings and electronic discussions. I will show you one frightening picture. This is real. This is from 4 years ago. This is a schoolroom in South Korea. Now, this is a robot English teacher. Those of you who are going to get pedagogical degrees, good luck. But does that mean that the concept of schools and universities has no value? I do not argue so. I confess that I look at this picture with some concern indeed, but I think there is a great value that education embodies and continues to embody, and will embody when all of us are gone. And that is critical thinking. And here is where I link education, critical thinking, and living honorably. I know of no better way to develop a critical thought as a faculty of thinking, than to build habits of mind. One can, of course, become a wonderfully self-critical thinker by oneself. Yet universities and schools have traditionally provided the best opportunities most individuals have to shape and advance their views, to respond to criticism, and to develop self-criticism. By promoting self-critical thought, teachers and professors do their best work. And so I propose to you the argument that schools and universities are not primarily designed to teach knowledge, but to teach habits of thought. Now, of course, it is important to teach students knowledge. I don't dispute that. But I'd like to exemplify my argument by recounting a conversation I had about 3 months ago with a guy called Matthew Hollical. He's a professor at Purdue University in Indiana in the United States. His specialty is computer science, and he's not a particularly old man. I guess he's mid-50s. And he astonished me because he said that nothing he teaches had he ever studied as a student. His field moves so quickly that everything he learned formally in a university is now so far in the past tense that everything he is now teaching is what he has learned after graduation. He's able to do that because his teachers did not give him specific knowledge. They taught him how to think, to learn, to reason, and to assess information. Now, not all of us work in fields that move so quickly. My own specialty of English and American literature has the blessing that great writers stay dead and don't really bother us when they're done. There are a few of them. These are people I teach and love: Shakespeare, Edgar Allan Poe, and Ernest Hemingway. They wrote beautifully, but fortunately, they're all dead and they don't bother me anymore. In many fields, of course, I think of, just off the top of my head, computer science, biomedicine, robotics and nanorobotics will genuinely be revolutionized in the next 10 to 15 years. And that is very much within the working lifetime of someone graduating in those fields today. So I think the highest value of education, whether it be in primary school or in universities, is to allow and to provide forums for critical thought and for the development of skeptical reason. We may not always have the correct answers. Indeed, we often have the wrong answers. But by promoting critical thought, we help ourselves to recognize our errors, our colleagues to recognize our errors, and perhaps even our students. Now, for those of us who teach, promoting critical thought is sometimes more difficult to implement than it is to say. It requires very often relinquishing the role of the master, the person at the top of the chain, and becoming instead a participant in a dialogue with one's students. It is always very easy to refer to one's own authority, to talk about one's own research, to cite one's university degree, to refer to one's academic title. But all of you in this room know that the category "an appeal to authority" is one of the primary logical errors. If one is correct, one should be correct irrespective of who one is or what one's title is. And students respond to that if you allow them to do so. It requires of teachers a willingness to give up authority over assessment and grading sometimes. I know myself that it can be difficult to design a syllabus, teach a course, distribute materials, create a test or an examination, and then have it graded by a team of other colleagues. But I also know that I have a much stronger sense of justification for that grade than I might if I were to attribute the grade myself alone. I would like to show you this. It's perhaps a bit difficult to read, but what it does show is explainable. This is Texas A&M Health Sciences faculty assessment. This is a very good school. And every year they go through this cycle of assessment for every class and every program in their curriculum. They're inspecting themselves, and it is a requirement to apply an objective standard. Didn't know the progress that had happened in the classroom. But I argue that one of the best ways to promote critical thinking is to demonstrate it oneself, about ourselves and publicly. Students are indeed observant. If they can see that an instructor relies only upon the title or a diploma, but cannot think or reason, that student will become cynical both about the instruction and the grades. If you demonstrate a willingness to allow collective grading by colleagues, or assistive assessment by experts, or the implementation of standardized tests, one expresses faith in one's knowledge in one's reason, and in one's grasp of material. I may have to give up a measure of authority to have a team of colleagues grade essays submitted to me, but I gain in the faith this measure demonstrates in my own work in front of my students. If I subject myself to external examination, so they can have faith in the judgment that that external examination brings. So if a student complains about a grade, and I state that it was not given by me, but by a team of 2 or 3 colleagues who assessed each examination by student number instead of by name, then he or she, the student, begins to recognize that the policy of the grading was based not upon my individual perception, but upon a process designed to guarantee objectivity. The student may not be happy, but he or she will, I hope, recognize the validity and the integrity of the process. And here is where I double back to Immanuel Kant. As I noted previously, he didn't say that it was necessary to live happily. He said that it was necessary to live honorably. And in this sense, I think his thought applies to what we will be discussing over the next 20 hours. It does not make me, or likely you, happy to be incorrect. One does not like to be wrong. One regrets error. One tries to avoid and to correct mistakes. But I would suggest that to develop critical thinking skills, and indeed to develop a self-critical attitude towards oneself and to one's own knowledge, is indeed the key to living with honor. We are all realists enough to recognize that life contains hardship and error and pain and loss. These cannot be avoided, yet to learn from them requires an attitude of criticism and skepticism. I cannot merely say that I have misfortune, or I will not learn from it. If I feel a pain in my chest, I can do one of 2 things. I can curse the gods for giving me pain, or I can decide that I smoke too much and quit smoking. The gods are tormenting me, or I'm doing something wrong. By the application of reason, instead of crying in despair, I can turn misfortune into knowledge and pain into dignity. If I can understand where I have gone wrong, or where I have not learned, or why I hurt, I have a much better chance of assisting myself. And here, I think, in conclusion, is where Kant's thought may lead happily. That is, that it is not necessary to live exclusively, either happily or with honor. One does not need to trade one for the other. Indeed, I would suggest the opposite, that a life of happiness is often indeed the result of living honorably, which I would suggest is often the result of living by self-critical thought processes. If one subjects one's experiences to reason, if one requires proof of one's own impressions, if one questions rigorously and honestly what one really wants to believe, then one can make changes that will often, if not always, result in a form of happiness. And if we, as educators, can promote both the honor and the happiness of our students, then I think education will indeed continue to have a valuable place in the life of society. Thank you very, very much.
Thank you, Professor Edukimit, for the very interesting point of view which relates honorable life and education through critical thinking. I think that this is the message which every one of you and every one of us is going to carry on and remember step by step and on future perspectives. And at the same time, to all of our that the sessions of tomorrow will enhance of the critical thinking in education.